I was a little freaked out. I didn't know what to do. Like you said, been out of it for so long, and then to study for one format, and then it gets switched on me for something that was outside of my power, was definitely a little forced me to take a step back, and it added to the anxiety and the issues that kind of all started from the beginning. So, and none of them were the same difficulty. So I had no idea what to expect on the exam. So I was completely lost.
Bonjour guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Fred. Fred recently passed the FE exam after taking it 3 times. Is that correct?
Right.
Fred? Okay.
Yep, yep.
And so in this video, he's going to share with us his FE experience and how he did and how he prepared to pass his FE exam. Fred, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited to do this. So the first time we talked, I believe it was around May, right?
Yep.
We had a phone call and you were just a little bit lost, not sure how to pass your FE exam or how to study for it. And then after that, I remember you enrolled in the courses and then you've just been studying since then. And then recently you took your FE exam in July, which means you took the new format, right? 2020.
Correct.
And
it was early August I took it, but yes, it was a new format.
Yeah, so you took the new format and then you passed your FE exam. So before we dive into all of that, why don't we start a little bit, you telling us a little bit about yourself. When did you graduate and what was your major?
All right. So I graduated in 2011 with a bachelor's in civil engineering. After that, I mean, I was like an average student there. I worked for the grades that I got, but wasn't always the best student. I did take the FE, like you said, twice, once my junior year and then once within a month from when I graduated. And I did fail both times, which kind of added to the anxiety of starting this process all over again 10 years later. But with your help, I was able to pass, like you said.
Yeah, that's great. So you haven't been really in school, or you haven't been studying for your FE exam for 10 years, and then
Correct.
You took the new format and you passed, you can say you passed in your first try after 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm also not working in the field either. I'm actually in the aerospace industry. So I've been out of the civil industry for 8+ years, graduated in 2011. Didn't even know where to start with studying and things along those lines. I actually started in 2016. I bought the FE book and just never got around to it. It was always sitting on my shelf and I just didn't know how to start, when to start. I mean, there's other things going on in life, but yeah, I never really got too serious until the end of 2019. I sat myself down and I kind of was like, all right, I have to make a decision and just move forward with it instead of just letting it linger. So I was either taking it or I wasn't. I was going to go down one of two career paths. So I decided to take it. I did sign up for another course that was not yours. Signed up, and that started early February. And I had my exam was originally for May of this year. Because of Corona, it got pushed out, which I kind of felt like it was a blessing because I was not prepared in May. I thought I was going to be a lot more prepared from the course. Obviously, I knew I was a little rusty, so I was kind of like, what else can I do? So I had another 3 months. I got moved from May to August. With that, I started going on YouTube, trying to figure out like the gaps, see if I can figure out what I didn't understand. And that's kind of how I stumbled upon your course and your YouTube channel, and then kind of dug into it. And then, like you said, we had that discussion in May. I felt really comfortable. The courses you had or the subjects you had on YouTube were extremely helpful. So I thought it was a no-brainer. So I signed up for the FE Bites and started studying with that.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay, so let's take a step back here. So you started studying in February for this exam, right? And you were planning to take the old FE exam format, 2019, but because of the whole COVID situation, you kind of had to take it after the new changes. And I remember we also had the conversation because you were freaking out about the new changes. I think you sent me an email like, should I worry about the new changes? And we talked about that a little bit. And then I feel like you were like, okay, I got this. And then you didn't let the changes affect you too much, which is great. And And then, so you took, do you mind telling us which course you enrolled?
The PPI course.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
took the PPI course and you
Correct.
you used it to study from February to May,
Correct.
and then you felt like you didn't grasp everything that you needed for the FE exam, and so you started to dive in, do research, and then after that you enrolled in the course. So after, when you enrolled in my course, you just really stayed focused till you took your FE exam in July. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember when the Corona happened and they had to move my exam. I actually contacted the NCES contact hotline and just was asking. I was like, because of Corona, is the test still really changing in July? Like, I was a little freaked out. I didn't know what to do. Like you said, been out of it for so long, and then to study for one format, and then it gets switched on me for something that was outside of my like power, was definitely a little forced me to take a step back, and it added to the anxiety and the issues that kind of all started from the beginning. So yes, you kind of talked me through that, and you made me feel comfortable. And like I said, the YouTube channels, I think what you do great is that you give that step-by-step process, which I noticed in the YouTube channels and knew what I was lacking from the first course. So I thought it was a no-brainer. I had to sign up for it, and obviously it helped me out.
Yeah, that's great. There's one thing I would like to mention, is just because there are a lot of people probably like freaking out with the new changes on the FE exam. But just like I mentioned to you, these changes, they started to implement them already. And in 2020, like after July, they just made them official. And
Yeah.
I've had students who took the FE exam before the changes. And then when they took it after the changes, they realized there weren't really much of differences. Like there was similar. I mean, they did remove computational tools, but the whole like concepts and the engineering, the questions were still the same. So there's just something to keep in mind for the students out there who are trying to prepare for their FE exam. So I feel like, don't worry too much about these changes. Just try to focus on studying and learning the material. That's it.
Agreed. And yes, I remember that conversation, and that helped. But then I was even thinking about it. The last time I took it was in 2011. So that little bit of change, it still would have been a change if I took it in May, or if I took it in July, it would have been completely different. So it wasn't like I took it the end of last year and I was so prepared for that and like understood that format, and they changed it up on me. So either way, I was going into a brand new test, and this was the first time I took the computerized test. So I knew I was stepping into a different test either way. So it didn't really shake me, but I was more worried about the studying. I put in so much time, and you did kind of comfort me and talk me down to just understand that they were already doing this anyways. It's just an official stamp to let them know that it was changing.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Because when you took it in 2011, I think the exam changed like twice since you took it.
Yeah.
So it
I
changed
think
in
I remember
2012.
that, like thermodynamics on that stuff I didn't even have to worry about now, and obviously it helped me out a lot.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, so you took the FE exam. Is it because it's required by your job, or you just wanted to take it?
No, so it was not required for my job. Like I said, I am in the aerospace industry currently. So this was more for opening doors, or future career paths, just allowing me to kind of broaden my paths if I want to go one way or the other. So yeah, I did not need it for my current job. I know most civil students that have taken it do, but yeah, I did not need it. It was more for the future, or kind of opening up more doors for myself.
I see. Are you planning to change to civil career path?
So my ultimate goal is to get my PE. That's why I even started this. So I know that I have to eventually get into the civil industry and work under a PE. My state requires 4 years under a PE after you pass your FE. So yeah, it's going to be a career change for me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you feel about that? You
I'm
nervous?
excited. Nervous, but I did it once in one industry. I'm sure I can do it again in another. And now I have my FE, so it's perfect.
That's great. Do you have an idea on like which career path in, because civil engineering, I mean, that's
Yeah.
very like, you planning on construction, design,
So
transportation?
my first job was in highway design, and I love that, the land development kind of aspect of it, road work and everything like that. So I figured I would kind of stay in that career path.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's jumping into scheduling. So you started to study for your FE exam since February.
Correct.
So on average, how many hours did you study per week?
So, like you said, it's kind of was around 6 months, and that was not my original game plan. I was going to take it after 3 months of studying. So I studied a lot. Like I said, I was rusty. I almost had to teach myself everything all over again. So I was probably 20 to 30 hours a week with the first 3 months. Yeah. I was basically studying like 3.5 hours a night all week, and then trying to get like 15 hours on the weekend, depending on what the topic was, because a lot of it, 2 of my nights were in a class for this course. So that was kind of, don't want to say wasted, but I couldn't do practice problems. So then the other nights was me kind of filling in the gaps that I didn't pick up during the lecture, and then actually doing problems to get a hang of it and get used to it. So I studied a whole lot more the first 3 months. Like you said before, I ended up signing up for your course, and my hours actually dropped significantly. I was probably missing half. I was 15 to 20, and the 20 might have been like static, so I ended up getting the static scores. The material where I knew I needed a great foundation and understand it, and it was more because you just provided so much information. I think if you had 5 videos and all of them, I would have been fine, but at the same time, like, you just give so much information, and that was kind of why it might have taken me the 20 hours that week to study that subject. After taking the exam and doing both courses, what I really noticed from the two was the first course, I spent a lot of time like filling in the gaps, figuring out where numbers and variables came from, compared to yours, where it was nice and stepped out, step by step, organized. You were showing us the table, you were bringing up the handbook, which I needed help with to understand. Like, you have an equation, where all the variables coming from, how do you read a Moody chart to get the right information the fact that yours already stepped that out, I didn't have to do additional homework or research after already doing the practice problems, because it was all there. So I think that was the biggest difference between the two. But yeah, I was probably closer to 30 hours the first 3 months, and like 15 the second 3 months.
Wow. Okay. So pretty much what I got from this is that, so the previous course, you kind of had to do a lot of like teaching on your own. You had to teach yourself a lot of things and try to fill in the blanks and just like connect ideas or connects like problems. Whereas you felt like my course, you didn't really have to do that, because I kind of tried to help you guys like try to make connections with the problems and fill those gaps. So you didn't really have to do any extra research, because I provided as much information to help you with the studying process. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And that really saved you a lot of time. And I think that's what I tried actually to do when I first created this course, is that because there are so many resources, and I think we talked about this the first time we talked, I was like, try to focus on quality versus quantity, right?
Yeah.
Just because you have all this material that you need to cover is not necessarily going to prepare you really well for your FE exam. But if you just narrow down your material, well, first, you're less overwhelmed and less stressed because you have less material you need to cover. And if you just focus on learning that small portion, you're going to be able to do better on your FE exam, rather than trying to cover everything. And most of it is probably not even relevant to the FE exam. And so that's really important, because people don't have a whole year to just sit and try to, I mean, we've already done that. That's why we went to college for 4 years, right? Now it's just time to just quick review for 3 months and just go take the exam. And I think that's what's really like a lot of the materials out there, it's lacking. It's not really giving the exact information that the students need so that they can go and pass their FE exam within, 3 months. And so I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you actually teach problem solving and not just how to get an answer for a question. So you go step by step and understand, and you even in some of your examples went and said, well, if they ask you to like calculate this other number, and you step through that process as well. One example I keep thinking about is a simply supported beam with a roller. You could probably do that with your eyes closed. You do it so many times. It's so simple, even with a point load. But then you went and then showed an example of the roller being on an angle. And that, I think, would have officially, like, it would have thrown me off if I didn't get to see that from you. Just how you translate the angle of the roller to the angle of the reaction going towards the beam. And that was like a big eye opener for me when I was going through the statics course. It was like, I would never even thought about that. I probably could have figured it out, but it would have took me too much time, or God forbid, I have a couple of those on there and it eats up time that I need for a more difficult problem than a simply supported beam. So just the fact that you take that next step, and like I said, you showed me how to, the thought process of like, okay, this is where you start, you go here, then here and here, that I felt like I could take on the more complex problems because I had a good foundation for the steps or the requirements or the things I need to find one after the other. So that was a big thing for me as well.
Wow, that's great. So you pretty much gained how to, I guess, approach engineering
Yep.
problems. And so this can also help you when you're studying for your PE as well, because now you got those like the process, the steps, how to think, what equations to get or stuff like that. I think
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, because even if you didn't have a problem exactly how you showed it, um, I had actually a couple of those problems on the FE that weren't on either one of the courses, but I at least understood the problem solving skills of like, okay, I know the charts in this part of the FE, like what equations relate to it and things like that. And it was just even the step-by-step process using the handbook the way you should, the numbers you can get to quickly. I think that was the biggest difference between the two courses and really helped me out because maybe that was a different format why I got a couple of questions that I didn't recognize. But I still, obviously I passed. I don't know how well I did on those problems, but I at least felt confident. I had an answer and I knew why I got my answer. It wasn't just closing my eyes and circling one of the numbers.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought it up because after you took your FE exam, you were a little stressed. You weren't
Yeah.
sure how you did. And I was going to tell you this, but I usually don't. Because usually when a student just take their exam, they're tired, they're just overwhelmed, they just want their result right then.
Yes.
Doesn't really happen. You have to wait a week and
Yeah.
you're just anxious. So usually I just try to tell you guys, just stay positive and let's just wait till we get the results and then we go from there, right? But I knew you would pass because here's the thing. I've had this thing happen before with another student where he was like, I'm not sure, and then he was stressed, and then a week later he passed, and that's because you guys have the skills now, have the knowledge to be able to answer any given question on the FE exam. And that's what I really try to do. Of course, there are going to be so many material or questions that are going to be different than what I have on the course, but I try to give you guys as much concepts and knowledge and skills so that you are able to solve even slightly difficult problems. And I think that's the problem that a lot of the resources out there, they don't really emphasize on. They don't really try to give you guys the concepts and skills to be able to solve the hard problems, and instead they just give really difficult problems and they don't really cover the concepts.
Yeah.
And just because the problem is hard doesn't necessarily is going to help you prepare. First, grasp the foundation of engineering, grasp the concept, and this way, with these skills, you'll be able to tackle the FE exam.
Yeah. And if anyone's out there and don't know if they need just the FE bites or the statics, I went through the FE bites and we were doing the statics and we had the discussion. And I am so glad that I bought the statics course as well, because like you said, it was such a foundation. I had other problems that were not even in statics, but it was still the same concepts. And because I knew a lot more about statics, I could get a quicker answer. And it was just, yeah, it was night and day. And just goes back to your comment of just building that foundation and the steps by steps. So it really helped me out. I was able to answer and feel confident with those questions that I did not see before.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, great. Now let's go back to the questions. So you said that you spent 20 to 30 hours the first 3 months, and then you spent only you spent 15 hours on the statics course, which was worth it because it is the foundation of engineering. And then after that, you just spent 20 hours a week or 15 hours a week just studying. Now, did you increase that time as the exam got closer?
I actually didn't. I actually decreased it, and I think it was just due to burnout. I felt like there was nothing else I could retain. Like there was a couple nights where I sat at my computer and I started doing problems, and I went through your entire course. The last like 2-3 weeks, I started rewatching them, probably the earlier subjects that I did just to kind of refresh myself. Yeah, but I actually reduced as it got closer to the exam, and I think it was just due to burnout because I basically went 6 months straight of constant studying because I thought I was going to take it after the first 3 months. Did not feel comfortable or prepared, so I felt like I had to just do it again. And that was a big driver. After all this, I was like, I just don't want to study like this anymore. I don't think I have enough energy. So that was a good motivator to kind of get myself to the finish line. But I definitely saw myself tapering off as I got closer to the exam.
Yeah, I do remember you did mention that you were burnout and feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So that was probably good that you decreased your study hours before is it 2 weeks or 2 weeks before your exam.
Yeah.
Now, how many times did you watch the courses?
So I went through all of them, and then you kept adding a couple more problems to the different courses, which was great. So I actually went back and did those, the ones that I didn't do from the courses that I already completed. And then I kind of went back in the last like 2 weeks was just watching videos. So I probably went through the entire course twice.
Okay.
One of actually doing the problems, and then two just kind of skimming through. We had the discussion where there's so much material, like I knew I wasn't going to be able to even just watch it and not do the problems in the amount of time that I had. So you suggested just going through the problems or the concepts that I didn't know or wasn't as strong with going through the first time, which I eventually did and think it was helpful. And prime example, like I said, that roller on an angle. I did not get one on my test, but I spent like a night just sitting there and I gave myself different problems, different angles, some with the actual angle, some with the 3-4-5 triangle, and just trying to translate it to how the reactions actually react onto the beam. So,
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about your preparation. So, run me through a typical week of studying for your FE exam.
So I'm big with schedules. I need like a time slot already set aside. You say that numerous times, even when we first started the course, it was kind of your intro to the course. Make sure you block out time and you sit there every night or however your schedule is laid out. It makes it easier, gets you in the right mindset. You talk a lot about the preparation before, the day before, just so you can hit the ground running. So I know that worked for me, and you're making sense as you went along with that. So I blocked off time during the week. Like I said, I was probably 6 to 9 o'clock during the week, and then 7 to 12 in the morning on the weekends. And then depending on the subject, I would probably study a little bit after lunch too. What was difficult for me, I actually had to get up. I was working from home for a couple months due to the coronavirus, and then I'm actually back in work now. And I wake up at 4:45, so there was no early morning studying. I know one of your students tried to do that, so they didn't have any distractions, this and that. So me getting up 2 hours earlier was not going to work out for that. And then because I had to get up so early, I couldn't spend too much time late in the evening and studying. So 6 to 9 really worked out for me. And then on the weekends, I was trying to just wake up. I already woke up early all the week just to get the studying in and kind of give my time to decompress and relax for the rest of the day. So yeah, that was kind of my preparation and how I studied.
Okay. Now, you work during the day. You go to work. You get home, and then you have to work. You have to study from 6 to 9. How
Yeah.
did you get yourself motivated to study? I mean, after a long day of work, and especially waking up at 5 a.m., I'm guessing by the time you get home, you're really tired. So how
Yeah.
did you get yourself motivated to study for 3 hours?
I think it was just my future career path and kind of where I wanted to take my career to the next step. So I knew this is something I had to do. And I kept telling myself that it was temporary. I didn't mind doing this for 3 months or 6 months, knowing that eventually there'll be a finish line. I'm glad that I did pass on the first try, but I was even ready to just go another 3 months and just crank it out until we passed. You kind of gave me that confidence to just go in nice and relaxed, which helped. But yeah, I think just once I already started, I was like, I might as well just finish at this point. I did take like a week to 10 days between the first course and your course before I started up, just to kind of like decompress, get myself reorganized. But yeah, it was just, I knew it had to get done. So I just put my head down and kept at it.
Okay, that's great. I mean, that worked for you. You just were trying to look at like the goal. This is the main goal, which is not really just passing the FE exam. Your goal was bigger than that. Your goal is getting the PE and switching your career
Correct.
and getting,
Yeah.
so that's why it's like, and just by reminding of yourself of that every day, you just kind of just power through. And I liked what you said, like that this is not going to be forever. There's a finish line, there's an end to this. So the faster I study, the faster I'll be done with this.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that's great. Okay. Now, I know you mentioned for the material that you use PPI and then the statics course and the FE Bytes course. Was there any other material you used to prepare for your FE exam?
YouTube, like I said, during the first course, didn't really need it as much during the second. I did use the YouTube, your channel, and then I think it's Marshall University for the more afternoon courses or topics. But yeah, mostly just those two courses, YouTube and the Lindbergh FE review book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Did you take any practice exams? I think you
I
did.
actually took 3.
Okay.
So yeah, I got 2 part of the first course I took. So I took those and did not do as well as I wanted the first try. And I never took the second one until after I took your course and actually increased my score. And I went back to the first one and actually understood the problems that I got wrong and why I got them wrong. So yeah, like I said, complete game changer. The fact that I was able to go back to the old test and understand like why I got things wrong or how I would have approached it this time was a big difference. And then you had an FE practice exam that you sent via email. So I took that kind of like a week before the exam just to kind of get my timing down and how I wanted to attack the exam. So, but I increased my score every time. So I felt confident, but just didn't know how it was going to turn out.
Yeah, I think there's always that little doubt and fear. I
Yeah.
mean, after your exam, you were still like not sure you were gonna pass, although I kind of knew you were gonna
Yeah.
pass. So you didn't take the NCS practice exam?
No.
Wow, you didn't even buy it?
No.
Oh, okay. You just
I
didn't.
figured between the 2 that I had in the first course and then yours, I was like, I don't know how many more exams I could take. So yeah, I never bought that one.
Okay, great. Now let's discuss some of your study techniques. Are there any study habits that you found not to be effective?
I think, I mean, to answer the question a little easier, the ones that I found effective was just doing problems. The first course felt like college to the point where, like I said, there was 2 classes and it was like, we have 130 slides to get through in 3 hours. Let's just crank it out. And you're kind of just given the slideshow definitions, this and this and this. So I think that's why I had a lot of problems during the first courses because I wasn't being taught how to actually problem solve or look at a problem. And I was actually doing them on my own after the fact and not during the class. So what helped me and what I noticed a lot was that basically just doing your problems or the YouTube problems and just going through problem after problem and forcing myself to look up in the FE handbook where things came from, why they use this equation versus this equation. And like I said, that is the step-by-step process that you provide with your course. So yeah, it was more the what worked better for me was just constantly doing the problems over and over.
I see. Now walk us a little bit how you would study. So for example, like there's a problem. Do you pause the video? Do you attempt it? How long do you attempt it for? Do you really struggle through the problems? Do you look at the solution? If you get it wrong, do you come back to it later, like 2 days later?
So this was actually a struggle that I had because I think I contacted you a couple of times because between the first course and your course, the questions were completely different. I could not get a sense of how difficult or how easy problems were going to be. So it was a wide range of problems that I was doing. So the way I started with your course was you played the video. It's usually an opening clip of like the problem. And I started noticing you started giving hints of like where you should look in the handbook, this, and this. And then it went to the second video where you actually saw the problem. I started getting into a habit of just hitting play and then pausing it and reading the question myself and not even taking your hints because I kind of wanted to struggle through it. You would put us in the right direction or section on the handbook, which was great when I started getting a little stuck. But I wanted to go into like not knowing it at all or and see how much I retained from either the first course or just all the prep work that you had. So I started off with that and just reading through the problems. And then if I didn't get it right away or kind of had a feeling for where it was, I let that video play out to see if you added any hints or any helpful where to start or your mentality going through the process, which was really good. And I went through every problem like that and did them before I even looked at the solutions, even if I was way off or just I wanted to struggle through it. But yeah, so I attempt the problems before actually seeing the solution.
Okay. And when you started this whole studying process, did you at some point start to make connections? Because I know when we talked, you were afraid that you're gonna forget the material. So let's say you started with math and then you got to construction, which is the last topic in the civil specifications. Your biggest fear when we first talked was like, what if I forget math, or I forget the first materials? So how did you overcome that? And then did you started to have like this, started to make connections? When did things start to click? When did you start to see the big picture?
Yeah, so I did not feel comfortable going through the first course. And like after I finished the topic, that I understood what was going on to go to the next one. So that was a big difference for me between the two courses with yours. So I was not as worried of going through the math early and then construction at the end and forgetting math, because like you said, I felt like I was building that foundation and kind of understood what was going on. And I mean, it still crept in. Like I said, the last week I was going back through old videos of the earlier courses, but to answer your question, I think that's when it kind of hit, was when I was going back through and I understood. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this on my calculator with vectors, or I know what to look at there and how to manipulate that equation. And just, it was all starting to click after the fact. It was a nice little refresher. It was sitting there in my brain, but I needed just to give it a little jump start.
That's great. So you finished the whole course, you finished your whole studying, and when you were just kind of reviewing everything, then you realized, oh, I guess things are making sense, and that your brain was making connections while you were studying this whole thing. You just realized that when you started like going over the problems again.
Yeah, exactly. And I even noticed between different subjects, a lot of things overlap. So some of the gaps I might not have picked up on the first course I did tied into the second course, but I understood where it was coming from. And yeah, so as I just kept building from one course to the next or one subject to the next, they were even building on top of one another as I got further along in my study.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up. And I always tell you guys, try not to skip topics. Like try to go in the order of like how it is on the specifications. Like start with math and then go to statistics and probability, and then engineering econ, hit statics. Make sure you understand statics before you dive into dynamics, mechanics of materials, fluid mechanics, materials. These are very important, and I think they have them in that order for a reason, right? And then also like jumping from one topic to another, I usually don't recommend it. However, some students, they find it effective, and I just feel like when you actually, and I think we talked about this, I tried to tell you, like, try to finish math before you move on to the next topic. And the reason that is because once you finish math, there is this sense of accomplishment, and that is going to keep you motivated and to keep you going. Because when we complete a task or we complete a topic, we felt like, okay, it is a small success, but it is a success. It's something you have accomplished. And I think that's important to keep you going, to keep you motivated, to keep studying for your FE exam. Whereas if you just got stuck in math and then you're like, I'm just going to skip this and come back to it later, you jump into engineering econ, you get stuck again, you're just jumping. At the end of the day, you're going to feel like you haven't accomplished anything, and you're going to lose motivation. You're going to have this lack of motivation. So it's important to have these small accomplishments and celebrate those small wins, because that's what's going to keep you motivated and keep you going.
Agreed. They're a little confidence boosters as you complete one subject after the other. I would be a little overwhelmed if I went through math and I didn't understand anything and said, all right, I'm going to go to the next one, and it happened again. I would feel like I didn't understand anything, and it would have definitely thrown me off of my studying. So yeah, I agreed with that, of just going through and kind of muscling through the problems you didn't know, but like you said, completed a subject, and then a little confidence booster before you moved on to the next subject.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Next, I was hoping we could explore the day before you took your FE exam. Were you feeling ready?
Yes, like I said a little bit before, there was nothing else I could study or kind of retain. So I am working still. I was in the office at this point, so I actually took the day off before to kind of just like let myself decompress. Um, I slept in a little bit, worked out just to get my mind off it, kind of get moving and get active, and then I spent the rest of the day kind of relaxing and not kind of think about the exam. Um, I was more concerned that if I kept studying or looking at the stuff that I didn't know and trying to pick it up, I was actually going to like lower my confidence in myself, and it was going to throw me off during the exam and kind of cause me to question myself as I was answering the problem. So I knew I had a good foundation. I knew I did not know everything, but I was ready to take the test. Yeah, I wasn't ready to do any more studying during that time.
Yeah, and I think it's important that like try not to learn anything new at least 3 or 4 days before your AP exam because it's gonna affect your confidence and you're gonna start freaking out. And I think it's important to just kind of review what you've already learned rather than studying something new.
Yeah, I agree. I remember talking to you kind of the week before and saying, what should I do? And this and that. And you did bring that up. So I did not learn anything new. Like I said, reviewed a couple of the videos, but the day before I kind of took the day off and relaxed and just let it all sink in.
Yeah, and I liked how you worked out. That's great. I think workout always helps. At least like for me, if I'm stressed after I work out, I feel so much better.
Yes.
I think that really helps. Now, were you stressed? Because I know, was it a week before when we had the phone call and you were feeling a little bit overwhelmed and not overwhelmed, you were just stressed. You weren't sure how the exam questions like they were gonna be, and you're not sure what to expect. And then you were like, is it going to be like because the PPI questions, like you mentioned, are very different than the questions on my course. So you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
what should I? So we had a little bit of a talk and you were feeling a little stressed. So were you feeling so stressed the day before your FE exam?
I wasn't, and it was because our talk. And like you just said, I got through your entire course and wanted to do some problems for the afternoon section. So I actually went back to the original course. I still had access to it because of Corona. Um, so I was going through their problems, and there's, like you said, a lot of problems. It's more the quantity versus the quality. Um, but they were all different types of questions. They had like a quiz generator, practice problems, textbook problems, slide problems, and none of them were the same difficulty. So I had no idea what to expect on the exam. Yours were a lot different from the first course, the textbook, anything I was looking. So I was completely lost in why I reached out to you to kind of get a feel for what I should do, what I should worry about, and what I shouldn't worry about. But that was the week leading up, and kind of after our discussion, I felt a lot better. The day before, I did not feel stressed. It is what it is, and I was ready to take the exam.
Awesome, great. Okay, now let's dive into the day of the exam. How were you feeling during the exam?
I actually felt pretty good. It was something different because I had to wear my mask. I actually was studying with my mask on
Okay.
a little bit just to get used to that, wearing a mask for a couple hours while I was sitting there doing problems. So I thought that was helpful. Um, but yeah, I felt pretty good. I felt prepared. Um, yeah, I just went
Okay.
into it with a positive mindset. Like I said, I didn't want to dwell on the stuff that I thought I was going to forget or didn't remember, and kind of just go in and just take it one question at a time.
Great. And so when you started your exam, because you weren't nervous at all, like even at, because I remember like the first question, like I froze. Like I was like, it was a very simple, easy math problem. And I'm like, why can't I solve this? And it just went next and just, I got to the question where it was really easy. And then I was calm. And then I went back and then did, the first couple of problems. But were you feeling like calm from the beginning?
Yeah, I don't know why, I had a good approach going into it. Was kind of, I think, what helped me out, and I had the same thing happen to me where I got to the first problem and kind of froze, but I wasn't worried. I kind of stuck to my game plan of what I wanted to do, and it worked out. But yeah, I think that I was real anxious and nervous for 6 months, especially talking to you towards the end of it. You kind of walked me off the ledge, and I just felt like I need to have a clear, focused mind instead of worrying and doubting myself. And I
Hmm.
think I forced myself to kind of relax and just take it one question at a time, like I said.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You have a very like a powerful mind that you were able to, talk to your brain and be like, "Hey, calm down. We got this." That's very powerful to do.
Yeah, I think I got lucky because it was a roller coaster ride studying for the last 6 months. And then even after I took the exam before I got my results. So maybe I was just in a good point at that time of the exam and I was able to calm myself down, but it was definitely a roller coaster before and after. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think I got pretty lucky.
Okay. Did you track your time?
I did. So I
Okay.
set it out to my exam was actually split 58 and 52 questions.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff I was looking at before, I don't know if that's due to the new format or anything like that, was closer to 55, 55. Um, so I started out with giving myself 2 hours for the morning session, knowing I was going to run over. I didn't want to set it for 2.5 or 3. Um, I just knew if I had a hard timeline for 2 hours, it would force me to get the things done in 2 hours and then let me go over another half hour. And that's kind of what happened. I finished the first portion or the morning session in 2.5 hours. Like I said, I had a good game plan, or I felt like it was a good one for me. I went through all of the problems and answered all the ones that I knew right away were easy or quick, or I knew exactly where the equation was. Kind of like you said, the first two problems I was like freezing and they were real easy. It kind of let me build up my confidence and kind of like get me into the groove of taking the exam. Any of the problems that I knew how to do, but knew it was going to take a little bit longer, I was going to have to search a little bit more in the FE handbook, I flagged. And then anything I didn't know, I left blank. So I basically went in a 3-phase, like did everything I knew quick. All the ones that were flagged, I filtered on flag and did all the ones that I knew was going to take a little bit longer, but I got the easy, quick points out of the way. Was able to do that. And I ended up with like 8 problems left. Right at the 2 hour mark that I didn't know. And I spent the next half hour kind of crossing out the answers that I knew were not right, or you can kind of figure it out and do an educated guess. So that was kind of how I took an approach to it.
Great. And how was your afternoon session?
It was good. It was around the same time. I finished with 2 minutes left, so I took up all the time I could, and I went with the same mindset. So there was a little bit more problems on the second session, probably 12 to 15, where I wasn't as comfortable with. But that was just due to the more complex and more equations and kind of questions that they ask in the second session.
Yeah, I think the second session is also a little bit harder in terms of like a lot of times you probably need the more than one equation to solve for those
Yeah.
problems, and sometimes they can be long, and sometimes you get a conceptual question where you're just like, how would I even know this? I need to either work in the industry for like 10 years or read a boring book, but it's hard to get those questions. And I've had students who mentioned that before, especially in transportation and environmental. So the questions that you had no idea about and it was hard to do an educated guess, did you pick like a certain letter or was it just like
I picked B.
Okay, that I'm just checking because like a lot of my students do that and I just want to see if it actually works. It's been working so far. I've had so many students pass and they use similar method. They all have different letters. Some do D, some do C. I've seen a lot of B's, but I don't know. I mean, the NCS could be listening right now and they could change that. So just watch out, guys. don't just go for B.
Don't
but
take it
yeah.
from me.
What is it?
I said, don't take it from me to use B if you don't know the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now, were you feeling confident when you finished the exam? We talked about this a little bit. You were nervous. You weren't sure how you did. Did you think that you were gonna pass?
So, like I said, the week after I took the exam was a roller coaster. When I left the exam, I felt like it could go either way. I thought I'd be a lot more prepared from 6 months of studying, but it might have just been the types of questions. But I also know I didn't bomb it. So I thought I had a good chance of passing, but I also know there was a couple questions that maybe I just guessed correctly, and that's kind of how it worked out. But when I left the exam, I was kind of in the middle and realized it could go either way. And then when I got home and a couple of days later, I was looking through the different topics and the subjects and what was on there. And I was kind of reading through it and I felt a sense of panic, like, oh my God, these were the type of questions. Like I kept thinking of all the ones that I struggled on the exam instead of the ones that I knew I got real easy. So maybe that got into my mind that I did terrible in the exam. And then a couple of days after that, I was trying to like calculate in my head on like Monday, Tuesday, what I could have gotten. And I realized like I said, I only guessed on 8 on the first in the morning session and 12 to 15 on the afternoon. Even if I got those all wrong, I should be pretty good on the score. So then it gave me confidence that I probably did it all right. So I was back to it could go either way. So yeah, I didn't know what to expect. I was excited, but also nervous.
Wow, you had a tough week.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
That sounds a lot.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you were like all over the place.
Oh, it was every
Uh,
other day. I was just doubting myself, and then I was like, "No, I knew this," and then it was like, "Yeah," but it was back and forth all week.
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm glad you passed and you did well. Um, okay, are there any areas that were difficult that you wish you would have studied more?
No, to be honest. And just going back to my original comment of you just provide the steps by steps. There's problems on there that I did not see in either course, yours or the first one I took, or even any practice problems. So I don't, like I said, I don't know if it's to the new format of the exam or not, but just having those steps by steps, they might have been one or two problems that were part of the ones that I had to guess, but I had to guess because I didn't see them, but after I had enough time, I sat down and kind of went through the FE handbook and how you would do for a problem I did know. Most of the equations are in the same area, or they kind of point to one another. Another thing that I noticed when I went through the 3 phases was that I found a problem or saw a problem later on that kind of connected to an earlier problem, and it might have been a gap or something I didn't remember. But once I saw it in a different format or the next step of that process, it allowed me to kind of piece some things together too. So I found that pretty helpful, and I was able to answer some questions with that
Yeah.
mentality.
I think that happens a lot. And I remember I've had that before where they would give 2 or 3 questions that are similar but slightly different. And it's like either like the second part of the first question. And
Yeah,
I think they do that a lot. I've had another student who had a similar kind of experience. Now, are there any concepts or topics that stuck out to you?
I would say the conceptual topics were the biggest things that I noticed after the fact. You kind of hinted towards it. I don't know if other students made comments that there was a couple of conceptual questions that I felt I would have to be in the industry to know or kind of get the best answer. So yeah, that was probably the things that stood out the most. And they weren't conceptual questions along the lines of like definitions. It was like, how do you just improve a certain process or this or that? And if you're not in the industry, or all 4 of them could have been correct answers, but what was the right one? So yeah, that was a big thing I noticed was the conceptual problems were a little different than I was expecting. I thought there'd be more on the definition side opposed to the best possible solution and things along those lines.
Yeah, I've actually had a student who's in the transportation field, and she actually like the transportation questions. She was like, I am in the transportation industry, and they still ask questions where I was like, I've never
Yeah.
seen this. So yeah, it's tricky. There are some topics that are really tricky. Are there any topics that were easier than you expected?
I think statics, and that was probably the one I thought I was going to be struggling the most on. And I think it
Okay.
was your courses. I mean, obviously it was, but yeah,
It's funny.
and I don't know if it's because I got so worked up by it and was expecting to rebuild a bridge on the exam or go into the most extreme concepts with, yeah. So I don't know if I overwhelmed myself and kind of made it a bigger problem than it was. And then when I got the simply supported beam or something that you could do in your sleep, maybe that's why, or kind of how that happened. But yeah, I thought statics was going to be a lot more difficult.
Yeah. So it's funny because here I have the note from when we first talked over the phone, and you mentioned the topics that you struggled with from college. One of them was statics,
Yes.
and now statics you found it the easiest. And I think that's because a lot of times, and this happened with Julie as well. So she had some topics that were her weaknesses, and I think it was like engineering econ, it might be statics and materials. And she was like, okay, that's it. This is my weaknesses. I'm going to overcome them. And she actually really studied those materials. It's like overcoming your fear, right?
Yes.
And when she took the exam, those were the easiest topics that like she found like the easiest topic in her FE exam were those topics that she was afraid of. And I think that's because like, you know, you felt that was your weaknesses, and then you're like, I'm gonna overcome this. And you spent like 20 hours over a, what is it, 7 hour course? I think statics is 7 hours. You spent 20 hours just really diving and understanding the concepts. And I think that's why, you know, that's what happens when you overcome your weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I noticed that all the subjects or topics that I felt the most comfortable were the ones with the lowest questions. So I knew I had to force myself to kind of study the statics and the structural design and things like that. And I know I keep harping on this, but I think it was just your foundation of like the problem solving. I even noticed from the first course compared to yours, uh, going back to the older problems and just realizing what I did wrong and why I did wrong because you kind of laid out the foundation. I remember when I was first taking a look at statics, for example, I felt like it was just all coming from every direction. It was overwhelming and I couldn't piece it together. And you stepped it out one by one and kind of showed where we had to pull every variable or how to calculate centroid off of different variables. So yeah, I think that's what it was just the anxiety, like you said, and it forced me to kind of, all right, take this challenge on and understand the material as best as I could.
Yeah. And I think also a lot of times when we don't realize like sometimes our studying or our study techniques are not very effective. Just because you're spending 10 hours studying, it doesn't mean you are studying the right way, if that
Yep,
makes sense. Like
agree.
your first course, you studied 20 to 30 hours a week, and that's because you guys had the whole lecture and there were so many problems. But even by the end of that course, you still felt like there were so many gaps that you weren't sure you can make connections. You had so many other questions, and that's I think that's the problem. When you're studying, you have to make sure that you actually really truly understand what's happening step by step. And if you struggle with that, I think it's really important to get some help. Having someone walk you through the solution is going to like help you understand the problem better, and you're going to be better prepared for your FE exam.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, you stepped us through the process one by one and it just started clicking after that. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Now, which sections had a large amount of conceptual questions?
I think statics.
Really? Conceptual questions?
So, all right. So the way I would define
Oh,
a conceptual question is something that doesn't have an actual answer, like a number.
yeah.
We had a lot of problems where you kind of had to figure out the relationship between different reactions on a simply supported or cantilever or whatever it is, and you were not given numbers. It was more letters, and you had to understand what's the reaction at A versus B and the relationship between the two if the load is this way versus a distributed load or a point load. So there was no actual, here's the beam, go calculate the reactions at A, and you had a number. It was more how were they pieced together and like how they kind of interact with one another. So yeah, that's how I take a conceptual question, was where I didn't have an actual number to go find. So yeah, statics had a lot of that
Wow.
understanding of the concepts. A lot of it with like the moment of inertia and centroids and things like that, which your course really stepped through and helped. But yeah, it was a lot more conceptual than I was expecting.
Wow. Okay. And what about the afternoon?
Um, Transportation was a little different than I thought there was going to be.
Okay.
Some specific questions or things that I saw in common between the two courses were not on there at all.
Hmm.
Um, but the questions they did ask were not difficult. They were all in the same area, and you kind of could figure it out. And that's eventually what I did. But I didn't see any on. I was expecting to see certain questions on transportation that I did not see. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the horizontal and the vertical curve.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have any of those. You did have to find R for one of the problems, which had nothing to do with like an actual road. Um, but yeah, I was expecting to go in finding at least a horizontal or vertical curve and kind of picking out the elevation or station. I remember spending a lot of time on that. You give great examples and equations to kind of calculate the different ones given one or two variables. So yeah, I didn't have any of those. I was expecting to have a couple of those.
Okay, now lastly, I was hoping we could talk about your life after passing the exam. Did passing the FE impact your professional life?
So currently, no. I'm still in the same position. There's no pay raise, or I did not need the exam for my current career path. But yes, eventually it will most likely force a career change. So
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
career path, but not right now, not current.
Yeah. Well, if you do decide, I'm not sure if you already decided, but if you do change, your career path and you go to the civil industry, I'm pretty sure it's going to help you find a job real fast, because it's really one of the requirements to get a job in the civil field. So you need your EIT. So that's going
I
to help you
agree, and that was one of the reasons why I ended up taking it, because I was looking at career change, and all the job postings where you either needed to pass the FE or be a PE, and I was getting a little discouraged just to kind of start back in the civil. I thought me getting a job in civil would force me to study and actually take the exam, and I kind of had to do it the other way of taking the exam. But like I said, I think it's going to open a lot more doors having this behind me and completed.
Yeah. And I think this way it's actually better, because then you don't have that pressure from work where you have to take to pass your FE. Because I have some students who get a job in the civil field and they give them 2 years to pass their FE, or
Yeah.
even 6 months. That would be very stressful. I mean, the exam itself is stressful. Adding that kind of pressure from work, I mean, that's a lot to take in. So at least you feel like you're doing this for yourself, not for anybody else. And I think that's great, and it changes a little bit like your mentality when it comes to studying, because there's always that reminder of like, hey, I'm just doing this for myself. I'm not doing it for a company or for nobody else. I just want to succeed and excel in my career, and this is what I got to do.
Yeah, I agree 110%. And that was something I actually thought was a good thing for me, that I didn't have that additional stress because I did not need it for my job or current career path. So, yeah, I think that actually helped me out not having the additional stress.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have any closing remarks for engineers who are trying to pass the FE exam?
Yeah, take your course. So coming from me, who graduated in 2011, I've been out of the industry for 8+ years, and I've taken two different courses. It was a no-brainer for me. I'm just glad I took both of your courses. I know I originally took the FE bites, and then we had a discussion about the statics course, and I'm glad that I took that because it was a great foundation for all the problems. But yeah, to be completely honest, just the way you teach it and allow your students, and you're always so supportive, and you actually teach us how to problem solve, opposed to just, oh, if you see a beam, do this, this, and this, and you're going to get an answer. Because like I said before, you could get thrown off with a beam on a roller on an angle. If you don't understand the steps that you need to take, you could take the reaction at the wrong angle or in the wrong location. And that was a big thing for me while I was studying and actually taking the exam. I could have even written out the whole problem correct on the scrap paper and just picked B instead of C because I was in a hurry and the problem's wrong. So there's no partial credit, or you showed your work and you just picked the wrong number. So with that in mind, if you don't know all the steps, you could do one wrong thing and get the problem completely wrong. So yeah, I'm so glad and thankful that I took your course.
Thank you. That's
No
great. Well,
problem.
I'm really glad you did, and I'm really glad that you passed your FE exam. Really happy for you, and congratulations
Thank you.
on passing your exam on your first try 10 years after you graduated. That's huge, and that's really great. Really happy for you, and thank you for being here with us today and
No
sharing
problem.
your FE experience. You really shared some great tips, and I really hope this helps a lot of students to keep trying, to keep going, and even if they graduated, 10 years or 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. You can still do it if you just have the right mindset, the right material, the right study techniques. You can do it.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. So Fred took his FE exam after July 1st, 2020, which means after the changes. And he was able to pass his FE exam because he really focused on understanding the concepts. So that's what I recommend that you guys do. When you are studying for your FE exam and you're doing the problem, make sure you really grasp the concepts and you understand the material, because on the FE exam, you're not sure what kind of questions you're going to get, and understanding the concept, that's how it's going to help you to answer most of the questions on the FE exam. Now, if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you guys like this video, please give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for new videos every week. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck with your studying, and I will see you soon. À la prochaine. Oh yeah, everybody now.